Today's headline is in the Gungy deestrict, a country schoolhouse among the Connecticut hills. The subheadline says, "The primitive building and its strange occupants described in a recent report of the official schoolhouse inspectors." This story originally came from Norwich on September 8th. It says, Yankee officials, whose duty it is to fix up and true up district schoolhouses in the Nutmeg State in August yearly, report some queer things this season about the little old-time red schoolhouse under the hill, or in the country lane, in the town of Wayback among the peaked hills. Perhaps a good many city folks, used to urban temples of learning, have an idea that the quaint old red schoolhouse, with its homely oak plank for seats, of the same type as those in which Daniel Webster and old Israel Putnam learned reading, writing, and arithmetic, is quite obsolete in the world. If so, then they are not very familiar with the topographical intricacies of the land of steady habits. In many a rude old district of the hill towns, where the men folks still talk of Old Hickory, and the women folks at this season are stringing dried apples on a thread and drying sweet corn on the roof, the odd little structure, with its fond traditions, is just as consequential as ever, lifting its sharp brown roof just above the tips of the huckleberry knolls about it in a lonely pasture, far from other habitations. It usually nestles in a bend of briar-grown crossroad, with a plat of grassy common before its two doors for the children to play on. And not far away, there's apt to be a green mulberry tree, barked within an inch of its life by the big boys, possibly a slippery elm also, and always a thicket of tall thimbleberries and ground blackberries too. It is not always red, this schoolhouse, not by any manner of means. Often as perhaps it is unpainted, and brown and seamed and withered and wrinkled, like a good old countryman's lean face, and its facade, if it's not too unassuming as to shrink away from its term, is plentifully scarred with crosses and curlicues and initials of boys' names, and uncounted other letterings. It is identically the same queer and quaint weather-beaten old district school structure of the colonial and revolutionary times, unchanged in the slightest degree or the minutest particular. And there's a whole lot of the kind scattered all about the Nutmeg State as yet. It is the same weathered yet beloved structure, moreover, in which the poet Whittier went to school, and fell in love with his wee and winsome maiden, his brown-eyed first sweetheart, who spelled him down as nimbly as you please, but would not go above him at all. The same humble, busy eye of science, lost in the great pasture lot, that he had in mind when he penned the lines. Still sits the schoolhouse by the road, a ragged beggar sunning. Behind it still the sumac grows, and blackberry vines are running. It was in precisely such a house, more than 75 years old, in the antique old town of Salem, which sits on the gray hills 500 feet above Norwich, and 10 miles to the west of it, in the so-called Gungy district, that the official district repairs the other day found some of the strange things noted, characteristic of all rural red schoolhouses in Nutmeg Land. It was by no means anything very startling that the repairers encountered there, not at all. It was no more startling, in fact, than what had confronted them either in that structure or others just like it a score of times before. Only the sight of it. Perhaps they had got their ideas of things elevated a mite above the normal rural level by a recent call at some pretentious urban schoolhouse of the period. The sight of it affected them curiously that day. Merely passing strange it was to them, and nothing more. But cogitating about it afterward on the way home, and later at milking time, it did seem stranger all the time, in this age of broomstick trains, flying machines, and talking boxes. So after supper, the official repairs, in the back of the parlor of a member of the staff, recorded in black and white their impressions of the defects of the old red schoolhouse of Salem Town in the Nutmeg State. Hence, through this rude, matter-of-fact report, the progressive and pretentious cosmopolitan world is enabled to get a fleeting glimpse of a homely, primitive social time that it no doubt imagined was long past, if not altogether forgotten. The official repairer of antique Salem wrote, "In one district, Gungy, the seats were found to consist of 2-inch planks, with no backs, all of the same height. The scholars seated to face the windows and blink at the sun. One window is guarded by a large wasp's nest. Between the plastering overhead and the roof, a large swarm of honeybees have taken up their abode, some of which have gotten into the schoolroom and starved to death in the long summer vacation before they could find their way out. Under the eaves, a large hornet's nest was built. The hornets were flying in and out through the cracks in the building." Having recorded this tempered criticism, the repairers found this candid and not excessively severe verdict. It seems too bad that lightning goes on from year to year, destroying churches and fine residences, and skips this old schoolhouse. It is not to be inferred from this summing up, however, that the official critics wanted to be very severe on the beloved old gungy schoolhouse, or to contend that it was either very much behind the time or badly out of repair. On the contrary, it would grieve them greatly, doubtless, if the aerial bolt of destruction they lightly invoked should actually smite the ancient house, endeared to them by so many fragrant memories of their boyhood. No, indeed. It had simply occurred to them that the blessed old brown school structure was getting just a trifle behind times, that it really ought to be fixed up and trued up a mite. And they said so like men and official deestrict repairs. Nevertheless, they did not tell the whole story about the rude Gungy schoolhouse. They didn't recount how the old building has been cut and slitted by jackknife thrusts so plentifully that it's almost as ragged and perforated as a bootback's roundabout, that its worn floor is as undulating as the sea, in a degree, that its plastering is mostly off its walls and ceiling, that its window sashes wobble widely in the wind in broken frames, and its shingles are scaling off its roof in flocks like migratory birds of passage. Indeed, it is doubtful if any substantial repairs have been made to Gungy's old Temple of Learning in the past 30 years. It certainly doesn't look that way to old-time pupils who hopelessly pursued the free R's about its dingy interior. The house has remained unaltered, it is said, during the past 75 years. There is a single thick oaken plank for seats, running about 3 sides of its room, and polished though it has been by many generations of knowledge-seeking urchins, nevertheless, the splinters in it obviously are just as plenteous and prickly as of old. A single continuous desk of oak, with a slit hole for books and gingerbread and fly traps, accompanies the seat plank about the room, and since it is spiked to the walls, the pupils, in order to face it, have to throw their legs over the high plank. Turn in is their epithet for the act. In the center of the room, with its bare floor, seamed with gaping cracks, is a small box stove, but it's a corker to roar and bluster and hum, and its long, rickety pipe is carried on hanging wires into a hole in the wall. This story came from the great state of New York, being reported in the Sun of September 9th, 1894. Thank you for joining us today. If you want to continue to uncover all of America's lost and forgotten history, then remember before you leave to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and remember to like and comment below. And we will see you next time on Americana Archives.